Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Can we have a look at this on the front of the Times this morning? It's in a slightly different take on that, the inside pages of the Sun, I noticed. But looking at this Tower Hamlets case, this foster child, a white Christian child of 5, who's been supposedly put with a Muslim family, a very conservative Muslim family.
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't have all the facts of this story, but I have to say, look, these stories are always really difficult, and I think you have to always come at it from a sort of a common sense point of view. It's very easy to sort of play politics on either side of it, but you have to look at what are the needs of the child and how are they best met. You know, I'm from a Muslim background myself, but what I would say is it does seem to me quite strange that a child was put into an environment. The thing that concerns me is it says the family did not often speak English at home and encouraged her to learn Arabic. I think at the age of 5, if you are in foster care, you have probably come from a quite traumatic background. So communication and language and, you know, kind of, you know, just feeling comfortable is probably quite an important germane thing. And I think whatever your politics are, you would think that was sensible. So I do not know all of the facts of this, but it seems like something has gone awry on a common sense basis. But I think on the whole, you know, I think children can and should be placed, you know, with different families. I mean, you know, I know people who are Afro-Caribbean and they were adopted by sort of white families and had a completely happy, healthy, loving upbringing. But the point I think has to be is, like, I think language is quite an important basic, I would say.
Yeah, and culture. I mean, this story really has got nothing to do with religion at all, apart from the fact that, you know, the child needs to be where it is most comfortable, feels secure. If, for example, a child brought up as a Muslim was placed into quite a strict Christian family, there should be precisely the same level of outrage. And it, fascinatingly, the Times also reports that it was a Muslim judge, female Muslim judge, who made this decision to take the child away from the strict Muslim family and to another foster couple a little bit more suited to him.
Yeah.
And that's probably where the insanity has gone in this story, is that sort of bizarre decisions with no interest to the child's actual well-being at heart.
Well, there seems to be, it looks like there's going to be some resolution to that.
The decision to place a Christian girl with a Muslim foster family is being investigated by the children's watchdog. But is it part of a bigger problem with the foster system in this country? Kevin Williams is CEO of the Fostering Network, joins us now. Hello to you, thanks for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. First of all, what did you think of this, Kevin?
I can't comment on this particular story, obviously, without knowing the full facts. What I can say is that foster carers do an absolutely amazing job in caring for children who need care, often at short notice and with limited information about those children.
OK, so let me ask you then, what needs to be taken into account when deciding where a child is going to be placed?
Absolutely, we want to keep children as local as possible. It's really important that they keep their local connections. That includes family, but also school and friends. It's also important that we place children with foster carers that will have an understanding of their needs, whether they be adolescent or younger children, whether they enjoy sport or the theatre. It's important that we take into account all of those type of activities that children engage with and place them appropriately with appropriate foster carers.
And how important is the faith of a family as opposed to the faith of a child?
I think it's really important that we try to identify the right faith for children, but what we know is that there are more non-Christian children placed, so children with other faiths, often placed with Christian children. So this story is not unusual in that we try to make sure that the foster carers have the right skills and abilities to meet the children's needs, and faith is one of the issues that needs to be taken into account, but by no means is it the only issue.
There's a review in place presently, I believe. What needs to be considered as part of that review, do you think? Not talking about this case specifically, but more generally.
Is to make sure, the main thing absolutely is that we have a sufficient number of foster carers. So anybody who's watching this programme or listening to you, we need to make sure that if you're interested in fostering, you look on our website and come forward to think about fostering. Too often we hear about the foster carers who care for lots of children, and they do an absolutely amazing job, but we also need foster carers who might come forward just to look after one child or a sibling group. And foster carers make a huge difference, not only to the individual children that they look after, but to their communities and therefore to society as a whole. So important that we get the right number of foster carers with the right skills, but it's also important that the system recognises that those foster carers need ongoing training and support and are treated as the professionals that they are. I think historically we viewed foster care as a volunteer activity, but increasingly with the level of complexity of children coming into care, we know that foster carers will need training and support in order to meet those children's needs. And the third area that we need to really focus on is issue around funding of the foster care system. So it's really important that foster carers are funded adequately to make sure they can look after the children they care for, but also that they're funded because of the skills that they provide and bring to the role.
I wanted to go on to talk to you about funding. Actually, it is expensive. Fostering is an expensive part of our society. Who decides where children are fostered, where they're placed?
So it's the decision of the local authority, and the local authority will have its own foster carers, but on occasions they will also commission out to the independent fostering providers. But it's the local authority that will make a decision about where a child is placed.
And what impact does it have on a youngster when they find themselves having to be fostered? Where does that fit into the whole process?
So most children that come into care as a result of abuse and neglect, and sadly that means that they're often very traumatised. Leaving their family can be very difficult, and also families find it very difficult. Social workers will work hard with families to try to maintain them and keep them within their birth family, but on occasions that won't work and they need to be brought into the care system. And our belief is that they are better cared for in family homes than they are in residential care, for example, particularly very small and young children. We think that it's right that foster carers work with social workers to try and rehabilitate children back home, but for a variety of reasons, for many children that won't be possible, and therefore foster care is the place where children will be brought up for their childhood, whilst maintaining contact very often with their birth family, and that's not just parents, that's grandparents, uncles and aunts, brothers and sisters. And
how difficult is it to retain and recruit foster carers?
I think that a lot of people are interested in fostering, but they don't really come forward because what they hear in the media is often those stories around foster carers that might have cared for hundreds of children, and that often can be very off-putting when you think about, will my lifestyle allow me to have that number of children through the house? So, as I say, one of the groups that we're looking for is people that might just be able to care for a single child or a sibling group, and they will get the support and the training that they need in order to help them to undertake what can be at times a challenging role. I mean, children that come into care, as I've said, often don't have the easiest starts in life. As a result of that, their behaviours may be challenging at times, and there might be issues that they need to deal with. But what foster carers tell us is that actually it's really rewarding for them and for their families, and that it makes a difference to their life, a positive difference to their life, often in the way that we know that it makes a positive difference for those children they care for.
Okay, Kevin Williams, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Let's talk about this. Thank you. Let's talk about it in more detail, should we? Ruth Gledhill, editor of Christian Today, is here with me. Mohammed Shafiq, Chief Executive of the Ramadan Foundation, is joining us, as you can see. Hello to you both. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Sky News this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kev.
Good afternoon. Should we start with you first, while you're a little bit further away from us, Mohammed? Why is it an issue that this child was placed with a family of a different faith?
Well, I think what the issue here is the inflammatory rhetoric and hatred that has been whipped up by our newspapers over these past 24, 48 hours in an anti-Muslim agenda here. We know in just up the road from where I live in Oldham, we know of Muslim children who've been placed with practicing Christians. It's never been an issue. As long as those parents understand that the child that they're bringing up is aware of their own culture, their own faith, and celebrates their events and festivals, I think it is fine. This inflammatory commentary that we've seen over the past 24 hours will actually lead to less people, less Muslims wanting to be foster parents, because they know what happens when Muslims, become foster parents. A witch hunt is whipped up by the media, and I think it's irresponsible for those in the media to whip this up as an anti-Muslim thing, and that's really sad, because children will suffer.
Ruth?
I think it misses the point to shoot the messenger. Andrew Norfolk and The Times will have seen documents that we have no access to, so we don't know what's behind this. And we have to remember that this child was placed into foster care for good reasons. I don't think this is a Christian versus Muslim thing or Muslim versus Christian thing. And we have to remember that The Times was exemplary in its reporting of the Rochdale and the Rotherham child sex scandals. And Andrew Norfolk was an award-winning reporter for that.
Respect, what's that got to do?
I'm just defending The Times.
Muslim parents? No, absolutely not. You
defending
can't.
The Times' objective reporting.
Okay, guys, listen, Mohammed, listen. You've had your say. Let's be civil about it. When Ruth's finished, we'll come back to you, Ruth.
And it's very distressing to read the reports of this girl being forced to remove her cross, or claiming that she was to her mother, and also being told that she couldn't eat her favourite food, spaghetti carbonara, because it had ham in it. And so I think that it's unlikely that The Times made those facts up. Those are probably facts that did actually happen. And that's why this is a story. It's not because it was a Christian girl placed with a Muslim family. As we know, many Muslim children are placed with Christian families, and one hopes that their religious and cultural rights are respected, as one would hope vice versa. And I'm sure that this Muslim family, which is a conservative Muslim family, well, two of them, did their best to respect this girl's rights and values as a Christian. I'm sure they did. And it's just possible that a mistake was made somewhere along the line by individuals, by the council, by anybody. We just don't know. We don't have the information to know. But I would plead, as you would plead, for understanding and compassion in this. So nobody wants to go around shooting the messenger, The Times, but likewise, we shouldn't go around attacking Muslims or Christians for this.
Mohammed, come back to you then. You've made several points there. Mohammed, go.
Kay, there's just that inflammatory language we've just seen, linking up the issue of child sexual exploitation and the Times coverage around that, and somehow this. Just open the Daily Mail, open the Sun newspaper, the inflammatory, negative approach to this issue. I agree with my colleague from the Christian community that if there are Muslim children placed with Christian families or Christian children placed with Muslim families, you've got to respect the upbringing of that child, their religious identity. But I have an issue with the Islamophobic and anti-Muslim hatred, which is rampant. Even in this interview, instead of talking about fostering and care, the connotation that somehow the Times has the credibility when it comes to the issue of child sexual exploitation. I agree with that. I campaign for those victims of child sexual exploitation, but that's got absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with their anti-Muslim headline yesterday in the newspapers. So let's take a step back. Let's talk about these issues in a responsible way, but let's not inflame hatred towards the Muslim community, as we've seen, not just in the Times, but the Daily Mail and the Sun and a number of other blogs. And
likewise, let's not inflame hatred towards the press, which does a good job under very difficult circumstances. The Times is an exemplary newspaper, and it is not an anti-Muslim newspaper.
I've never said it's an anti-Muslim newspaper. I've written for the Times on many occasions. I think the headline itself is anti-Muslim and inflammatory. Is the Times newspaper an anti-Muslim newspaper? I don't think it is, but I'm just saying the media's got to be responsible. If you are trying to encourage more Muslim parents to become foster carers, and then they read the headlines that we've seen in the newspapers today, that somehow if they put themselves forward for this position, they will be shot down and they will be labelled an extremist, they will be vilified in some of the tabloids, then that will put people off, and I don't think it benefits children.
I wonder if we're missing the point here, guys. I wonder if we're wandering away from the point, which is the fact that this child is warm and safe, and potentially, Ruth, we're too quick to be insulted and offended.
Who's too quick to be insulted and offended? Sorry.
Society.
Well, I think that if this child was upset, which according to the reports, and we only have the reports to go by, she was, then I'm not saying society should be insulted and offended, but society should be concerned if there's a foster situation here that has not, for whatever reason, worked. But likewise, I don't think that the whole fostering system should be challenged because of one case where something has clearly gone wrong. And the Times and the media are not in charge of our fostering arrangements. Social services are in charge of fostering. There are regulatory bodies which are in charge of fostering. It completely misses the point, once again, in this issue, to blame the media. That's why I was defending the Times' record on reporting sensitive issues around this area.
Mohammed?
Well, I mean, look, I didn't realise that you were a defender of the Times newspaper and some of the tabloids. You've not read the Sun newspaper. You've not read what's been in the Daily Mail and some of the inflammatory language in which we've seen. Well, I mean, you've spent most of the interview. You've spent most of the interview defending the Times inflammatory headlines. I'm here to talk about the fact that ordinary Muslims in this country read those headlines and are deeply offended by that. Now, if you want to do a commentary piece about fostering and how we can encourage more parents to come forward, then that's absolutely great.
Which is what we are here to do, but you have just been attacking the Times.
Well, you've spent most of the interview
because I've been responding to your attack. You were the first to speak, you attacked the Times.
Well, I'm sorry, with respect, you...
As a journalist, a Christian journalist...
defended... Well, and I'm here to defend the fact that the Muslim community feels that this is an inflammatory headline.
Have you done a
and
survey?
the rise of
Mohammed,
anti-Muslim
so
media.
Well, I'm sure
you
if I may, Mohammed, and my question to you is this, that this little girl, this young girl, has been put with a Muslim family. She has been told, allegedly, that she can't eat certain foods because it is against the Muslim family's religion. Was she in the wrong place? Was she put with the wrong family?
Again, that's a decision for the local authorities to decide whether that is the case.
I'm interested in your opinion.
I haven't... OK, my personal opinion, I think we should make every effort to put children within the context of whichever faith they follow. So if we can get more Muslim parents, to become foster parents so that less Muslim children are put with Christian families, then I think that's a good thing. But if the choice is between leaving a child in care and putting that child within a safe, homely environment, whether it's a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew or person of no faith, then I would actually go for that foster family, whatever their religious background.
That's a reasonable point, Ruth, surely.
I totally agree with him.
So this family is saying, no, you know, because you're not eating carbonara, the little one's saying, because I can't have carbonara, I want to go somewhere else. She's warm and she's safe and she's being protected by a family that is prepared to do that for her.
And we have to remember that she was placed in foster care for a reason, and we have to respect that. And certainly there is a shortage of foster families, and in Tower Hamlets, Muslims outnumber Christians, so they maybe have more Muslim families than Christian ones who are prepared to foster. And so this family would have been a good foster family, is a good foster family, I'm sure it is. And the Tower Hamlets will be acting in the best interest of the child.
Final words from both of you. You, Mohammed, first of all, go.
Well, I just think that the inflammatory language that we see from some elements of our press needs to be called out, and that's what I've done in this interview, but also recognise that we've got to encourage more people to become foster parents, Muslims and Christians and people of no faith as well. And, you know, let's focus on the children and how we can support them from a transition of care homes into foster parents. Final word from you, Ruth?
I totally agree with that, and thank you for making that really exemplary point.
OK, thank you both very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. All friends in the end, weren't we? Now,
a judge has said there were no concerns about the welfare of a Christian girl said to have been fostered by a Muslim family when she was assessed by an independent guardian. The girl, aged 5, was placed in the care of her grandmother today. Tower Hamlets, the local authority responsible for the girl's welfare, has raised concerns about the reporting of the case.
A judge says there were no concerns about the welfare of a Christian girl said to have been fostered by a Muslim family when she was assessed by an independent guardian. The girl, aged 5, was placed in the care of her grandmother today. Well, our reporter Adina Campbell has been following the story and joins me now. So what is the latest on this controversial case?
Well, as you say, we now know the judge has made the decision, and that is going to make sure the girl is looked after by her maternal grandmother. And this comes after various national newspaper reports claiming the girl had been looked after by Muslim foster carers and that went against her Christian heritage and that the girl was encouraged to speak Arabic. But Tower Hamlets Council has rejected all of those claims and said the girl was looked after by an English-speaking family from a mixed-race origin. Now, we have had the details of this care order. It says the child was removed from her mother's care in March earlier this year on an emergency basis. The mother has substance abuse issues, and we also know the maternal grandparents are also of a Muslim background, but the mother says they are of a Christian heritage. So Tower Hamlets Council says in its statement that there have been inaccuracies in the newspaper reporting of this case. The judge has today said that the girl will be placed, as I say, in the care of her maternal grandmother, and that's in the best and safest interest of the child, and that's not based on any reports in the media.
OK, thank you very much for the latest. Adina Campbell there.
Now, a new development tonight in the case of the little girl whose foster care arrangements have made headlines for days. A family court judge has just taken the highly unusual step of publishing the judgment because of concerns about the way the media has been reporting the case. Our reporter Paul McNamara is here. Paul.
Yeah, so for days this has played out in the headlines. A young English child taken to care in March and placed into foster care. The foster care of Muslim foster parents, and that's what's generated the headlines here. There have been reports that she was encouraged to learn Arabic and that she wasn't allowed to eat pork. So here's the new bit. Yesterday, the family court judge said that the girl should be allowed to live with her maternal grandmother. But the judge also makes the specific point that none of that has anything to do with any of these reports. That was always the preferred option. It's just that when you're dealing with vulnerable children, you have to make sure that they will be safe. There's a vetting process that goes through, so the child was put into temporary foster care. Now, as you say, the judge actually released this 10-page ruling today, and that's a very unusual move. You know, family courts are some of the most fiercely protected because ultimately you're dealing with child safety. So for them to actually release this is a highly unusual move.
And what detail comes out in it?
Yeah, well, there are, there's some. So one of the points that's made is that in the maternal grandmother's paperwork, she's actually a non-practicing Muslim herself. It also says that the child's mother did raise some concerns about the foster parents, but ultimately she never made an application for the foster parents to be changed, for her child to be removed from those foster parents. And it also says that the child's guardian visited the child in foster care, but they had no concerns about the child's welfare and reported that the child was well cared for.
And ultimately, it's the local authority that's responsible for child protection. So what are they saying?
Yes, so this is Tower Hamlets Council in London, which is quite important aspect. I mean, understandably, they're very pleased. They welcome this decision. You know, there are some questions for them to answer. You know, the mother raised some concerns, so they're going to have to look into that. And they're going to have to address that. You know, but you know, they've raised the concerns about the reporting of this case. They make the point that the child was fostered by an English-speaking mixed-race family. That hasn't been reported. And ultimately, they say that child safety here is the primary concern. If the foster parents were safe and they looked after this child happily, that's what really matters.
Thanks, Paul.
Spotlight's been thrown onto the fostering system in the last few days with the case of a 5-year-old girl placed with Muslim foster parents. The reporting has focused on the distress of the child at being in an unfamiliar culture with Arabic apparently often spoken at home. She's just been taken away from the foster parents and now put into the care of her grandmother. Obviously, we can't go into the details of the case, but the judge overseeing it has made quite clear the girl's transfer to her grandmother was nothing to do with the media coverage. And the judge pointed out that the girl's appointed guardian had no concerns to the child's welfare and reported the child was settled and well cared for by the foster carer. But the judge did say that when the girl was originally placed, no culturally matched foster family was available. Should that matter? Are there enough foster parents out there to offer a choice? Elaine Dunkley reports.
Children who need foster care are amongst the most vulnerable in society. At a difficult and disruptive time, the priority is to find a loving home. But how much consideration is given to a child's ethnicity, religion and background? Today, a judge has ordered an English-speaking child placed into foster care with a mixed-race family whose reported use of Arabic upset her should live with her grandmother. The local authority involved, the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, has insisted the girl's foster family are English-speaking, but it has raised questions around the challenges of fostering.
When you do make decisions about placing a child somewhere in an emergency, if it's not the ideal placement, you then have to decide kind of what's what's best really. And there are also issues about their background, their racial heritage, their language, their religion. So there will be a whole number of factors that you'll need to take into consideration when you're trying to find the family that fits best. And as I say, the geographical consideration will be quite a significant one, because if a child is being taken out of their family, you don't want them to have to sort of leave school and have to make new friends on top of everything else that's happening to them.
The decision to place a child in foster care is made by social workers and children's services concerned with welfare. Judges can also intervene in the process if it's felt the child's needs are not met. Time can be critical in making a decision, along with the availability of carers.
There is always a shortage of foster carers. Because, well, apart from anything else, you know, like everybody else, foster carers retire. So we're always needing to replace foster carers who are already in the system, but we also have an increasing number of children coming into care. So the best estimates would be is that we probably need to recruit about another 6,000 or 7,000 foster carers sort of for England and for UK-wide to be able to kind of meet the demand that we have, and to ensure that we have enough choice really, so that we can provide the best placement possible for each child that's coming into care.
There are nearly 53,000 foster carers in England, of which 85% are white. 9 local authorities reported having no long-term foster carers from ethnic minority groups, and just over a fifth of fostered children are from an ethnic minority background. A shortage of ethnic minority foster carers means white British families often look after children from different backgrounds. It doesn't happen as much the other way round, but when it does, it can be seen as controversial.
But I think it's more about self-image.
Precious Williams spent much of her childhood with white foster carers.
And I remember quite clearly in my situation, in my childhood situation, eventually there came a time when my mother and stepfather wanted me to, come back and live with them as planned in a Nigerian household. And my English family just sort of said, no, we're not letting that happen, and it ended up in court. And I've actually seen the sort of legal documents now from back then, and the judge was very much in his decision. His decision was for me to stay with my English family. He's very much saying I can benefit from the English way of life and being in an English home, and he was sort of saying basically that's better than returning to an African home. This we're going back to the 80s now. That was the attitude then, but unfortunately this story is looking like that's kind of still the attitude now. That if a child of colour is in an English home, they're being sort of somehow they're benefiting from that. But when you have the reverse, there's a problem. And I also think if we're going to talk about diversity, we have to sort of realise that diversity works all ways.
Everyone agrees that children should be matched with foster homes that reflect their needs, faith and background. But the problem is there simply aren't always enough carers to make that possible.
Elaine Dunkley there. The controversy over fostering started on Monday when the Times reported details of the Tower Hamlets case. The newspaper put the story on its front page on Tuesday and again today. The journalist who wrote the stories is Andrew Norfolk. He joins us from Leeds. Very good evening to you. How typical a problem do you think, and I use the word problem in inverted commas because some may not recognise it as such, how typical do you think it is?
Well, as we've just heard, it is far more common in this country due to a shortage of foster carers from minority ethnic backgrounds for a non-white child to be placed with white British foster carers. We understand that not only in areas of London, but also in some other parts of the country, there are occasions when a white British child is placed with non-white carers. They tend to be older children. It's very unusual for a child who's only 5 years old to be placed in that sort of environment. And the overwhelming majority of foster carers, whether Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, or of no faith whatsoever, are trained and go out of their way to ensure that that child is made to feel as much as possible at home and in possession of their own identity, and made to feel that the world that they're entering is not one that's completely alien to them.
Right. There's been some concern over the reporting. You won't need me to tell you that. Can I take a couple of aspects? Because one thing, when the judge's statement was released today, it did emerge that the appointed guardian had found no problems and had spoken to the child in private and with other people, and had found that the child was well cared for. And I just wondered, because it wasn't mentioned in the pieces, whether that should have been a material fact in coming to a judgment on it ourselves.
You're absolutely right in what you say, and we did in today's reporting, because I was the only journalist in court, reflect that the child's guardian had no concerns. What we were reporting were the concerns of another social services employee from Tower Hamlets, and she was reporting what she was observing of the child, of that child's deep distress when she was being returned to a home where that child said she couldn't understand what they were saying because they didn't speak English. And it's also worth pointing out that this is a 6-month placement that we're looking at here. She's been with 2 different foster carers, one for 4 months, one for 2 months. The concerns that were raised by the child were to do with the initial 4 months. We understand that the statements Tower Hamlet has put out and the statement from the Guardian reflects the most recent 2 months.
Right. If you said the Guardian had no concerns, I'm sorry, I didn't see it when I looked at the piece. There was another aspect of the coverage, which was today, your piece implied that the judge had somehow responded, or the headline indeed implied that the judge had responded to the media coverage and taken the child out of the family and put her with her grandmother. And indeed, when you read the judge's statement, that's not at all what happened. She makes quite clear it was nothing to do with the media coverage. The council wanted her to go to the grandmother. That had always been on the agenda. It was actually to do with waiting to see that the grandmother herself was suitable to take her into care. I wonder whether that headline and strapline were appropriately written today.
Again, if anyone read the article that we published today, we quoted the judge as saying that the media coverage was no factor in her decision. It was the case that the girl's mother for some months had been asking for the child to be placed in the care of her grandmother and removed from foster care because, as the report reflected, there were concerns about the suitability of that placement. The timing was a matter of coincidence. We were unaware that hearing was coming up when we started reporting this case. The judge did criticise Tower Hamlets for delays which had prevented the decision being made sooner. But certainly in the end, all parties were agreeable to the transfer.
Indeed so. Andrew Norfolk, thank you very much indeed. Well, Andy Elvin is the Chief Executive of the TACT Fostering and Adoption Charity, and Neil Carmichael's the former Tory MP, who's chair of the Education Select Committee, had in fact been leading an inquiry into foster care before he lost his seat back in the June election. Evening to you both. Neil Carmichael, when you read the articles, did you have concerns about what this said about the state of fostering in the UK?
Well, first of all, the inquiry you've just referred to was focusing on 2 things. One was actually making fostering more popular, understanding that training needed to be enhanced in certain places, and actually pointing out that being a foster carer is a very good thing. And the second thing we wanted to talk about was the need that, for children's services to be much more holistic in their thinking, much more joined up in their approach to making the decisions that you've just been talking about. And I think those are the 2 points that effectively underpin this story in terms of what we need to do next.
Let's not talk about this particular story, but in general, do you think cultural, religious, ethnic fit matters?
I think what we've got to remember is that we live in a liberal democracy. Toleration and mixed cultural experiences are part of our society. So we don't want to get bogged down in that territory. What we want to focus on is actually the outcome for the child who is being cared for by foster carers, and actually also the overall ethos that we are trying to establish here, which is that young people need the proper support as appropriate, and children's services need to react in that way.
Well, that's all sort of, everyone will agree with that. I mean, mother with an apple pie.
Everybody does, but we've got to deliver it.
Let me ask Andy Elvin, do you think cultural fit matters? How much does, let's call it cultural fit, how much does that matter?
It can matter, it depends on the case. There are many examples of excellent foster carers from BME communities looking after children who are not from BME communities. It happens the other way around a lot. There's a lot of white carers out there at the moment looking after young people from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Syria, and doing a fantastic job, because the cultural capital the young people need to respect their background is available in many places in the UK, particularly places like London.
It doesn't matter as long as the parents are understanding of the child's background.
Precisely, because what you're after is a safe and stable home that can meet the needs of the child. That is always the most important thing.
In this particular case, one of the issues that I think shocked a lot of people, and it's disputed, so you're talking hypothetically, was language, was that the parents the foster parents apparently spoke Arabic a lot of the time and the child didn't. Now, whether or not that's true, that surely would not be a good thing, though, right?
It wouldn't be a good thing. I mean, in this particular case, that was a nonsense. It was a complete lie that was the case. To get to be a foster carer, you have to go through a long assessment. You have to have very good spoken and written English. So English is spoken in all foster homes all around the UK, and to suggest otherwise is completely fallacious.
Okay. Neil, does it matter to you, is it any different whether it's a Muslim child being put in a Christian family or a Christian child being put into a Muslim family? Is it entirely symmetrical?
Yes, I think it is entirely symmetrical because, as I've already said, we're a tolerant society, we're a liberal democracy, and those principles have to be maintained. I think our attitude must be about the actual quality of the care and nature of the decisions around who is actually going to look after the child. That's the important point here. So that's why we need to talk about children's services just as much as we need to talk about foster carers.
Is the basic problem, Andy, Elvin, that we don't have enough foster carers anyway to make the choices? This was the case in this case. There wasn't the cultural...
It's part of the problem. There's particularly not enough foster carers for teenagers and for sibling groups, and we always welcome more foster carers to apply. A lot of people rule themselves out of being foster carers. They think they can't do it because they're single. They think they can't do it because they're the wrong religion. They think they can't do it because they're too old or too young or the wrong sexuality. Foster carers come from all backgrounds, and they are fantastic. Foster carers do a wonderful job in this country.
And we need more.
We ought to be very grateful to them, and we need more.
Yes, we do. Yeah. We definitely need more, and that's one of the things that our committee was going to say when we were going to report.
Neil Carmichael, before we let you go, I think we need to ask you about our top story today, Theresa May.
Ah, yes.
Going on and on, or going on till the next election. Now, you lost your Stroud seat the last election. On a harsh day, you may say that was her fault. I don't know, maybe you blame yourself, maybe you blame her, I don't know. What's your reaction to her leading the party to the next election?
Well, we don't exactly know when the next election is going to be because we're in a minority situation and we've got very difficult decisions to make over Brexit. So this is going to be a turbulent time. And I suppose it's probably wise for the captain of the ship to point out that she's still holding on to the appropriate
Would you
equipment.
welcome her being leader of the party at the next election?
Well, I thought she was the right choice at the beginning when she first became Prime Minister. I was taken aback at the decision to have a general election when she did, and I was also slightly surprised to read the manifesto, and I can see you smiling. But I'm sure that if she were to lead us in the next general election, she would focus on the economy first and foremost as one of the key issues. And I can't imagine any mention of fox hunting.
Right.
So those are lessons to learn.
Neil Carmichael, Andy Elvin, sorry to digress. Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.